Please welcome now speaker number 2, Mr. Adam Goodman.
All right, so the theme is about dreaming big, and it's also about translating those dreams into reality. So what I have for you tonight are 3 hard-won lessons that I've learned as an advocate fighting for a better and more humane transportation system in Ann Arbor and beyond. The first one of these is that we really need to encourage our elected leaders and transportation officials to stop planning and start doing. And to give you a better sense of what I'm talking about, I'm going to take us back 10 years ago to when Ann Arbor City Council set a Vision Zero target for 2025. Vision Zero is a framework for eliminating serious and fatal injuries from traffic crashes. And it calls on us to recognize that humans make mistakes. We will never stop making mistakes. But when we make those mistakes, they should not be fatal. And to do that, we need to redesign our roads and our systems to make it so that people don't die. So Ann Arbor has now pretty badly failed at this goal. 2023 was the worst year for serious and fatal injuries since we started in 2015 until 2024, which was even worse. And 2025, it's not looking good, folks. Now, to be clear, Ann Arbor has done some good things. Across the country, serious and fatal pedestrian and bike crashes are skyrocketing. It is a terrible epidemic. In Ann Arbor, our rate has stayed closer to flat, still trending a bit in the wrong direction. But this does suggest that we're doing less bad than other places, and I wish I had a better message for you, but less bad is still something. And we have done some very successful specific safety projects like the bikeway system downtown. We have seen serious crashes drop to almost zero on those corridors where the bikeways were installed and where First and Ashley restored to two-way operation. That's a great result. But what we were talking about was Vision Zero, not Vision Some. So what we have done is badly insufficient. It's not nearly enough. So I think it's worth asking, okay, we had 10 years. What did we do? Well, one thing we did was we set up a lot of committees and we wrote a lot of plans. All right, our story begins in 2013 when City Council impaneled a pedestrian safety and access task force, which met and worked for 2 years. In 2015, the task force delivered their recommendations, including the 2025 Vision Zero target, which Council formally adopted at that time. In 2016, City Council created the Transportation Commission, a permanent advisory commission, but they have no formal powers. And then in 2017, a Huron High School student was hit and killed by a driver while in a crosswalk in front of Huron High School. And so City Council responded by passing another resolution, reaffirming the Vision Zero target, and this time demanding that the city administration bring forward a work plan to actually implement a Vision Zero strategy. So the city administration came back and said, well, what we need to do is we need to redo our comprehensive transportation plan for the city. So in 2018, they awarded a contract, started this process. That took until 2021 when we finally had a new comprehensive transportation plan, the Moving Together Towards Vision Zero plan that hopefully some of you have seen, and that was formally adopted by City Council. Okay, so we're 6 years into our 10-year goal, right? But hey, we have a shiny new plan. It's time to start implementing it, right? Right? Well, okay. It turned out that then we had to set up a Vision Zero implementation planning effort. The city awarded another contract and created another committee, which met for another year and change, and then eventually, their output was basically fed back into the city's capital improvements plan. In 2023, the city was also awarded a big federal grant, $3.8 million from the Safe Streets for All program, good program. But this turned out to be technically a planning grant. So in 2024, we went ahead and awarded another contract to another consultant to help administer the grant and develop more plans on, I'm not even sure how to put it at this point. This was to develop plans on how to implement our implementation plan. And also back in 2023, City Council passed a resolution saying, hey, we need to look at reconfiguring all of our multi-lane roads to basically no longer be multi-lane roads, because as the resolution very astutely recognized, those roads are disproportionately represented in our serious and fatal crash numbers. And so this year, we awarded another contract to do a study on that that's currently in progress and maybe done next year, I guess. Okay, so now it's 2025, and I think the question we need to ask is, hey, most of these plans are good plans. I do encourage you to read them, but when do we get to stop planning and start doing what's in the plans? Or what is the point of writing all of these plans if we are never going to implement most of them? Now, here's where I do need to tell you that I have some sympathy for the folks at the city, because this problem is much, much bigger than just the city of Ann Arbor. When you look at state and federal laws and regulations, when you look at what happens in other cities, you'll see that every level of government, the deck is stacked towards this type of exhaustive planning approach that often produces few tangible results. And I'll give you an example. You might be asking, well, why did we get a planning grant from the feds when we had so many plans already? Well, to its credit, the city applied for an implementation grant. But Congress, when it created this program, included a provision that said that nearly half of the funds had to be spent on planning. And all the implementation dollars went to bigger cities, places like Detroit that had a bigger need. So we sort of got this as a runner-up prize. But if these problems aren't unique to Ann Arbor, then we can look to other cities for solutions as well. And what you'll see is, in other cities, yeah, it actually is important to carefully plan big, expensive, long-term capital projects, but also these cities are doing quick builds. Quick builds are explicitly a way to get out of this endless planning cycle and actually try things in the real world. You use inexpensive paint and plastic posts. Just try out a new road configuration and then evaluate it and see how it's working and tweak it if necessary, and even undo it if necessary, if it's really causing problems. And there's actually a precedent for this in Ann Arbor too. As a pandemic era project in 2021, the city reconfigured South Main from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. This is a project that was planned and executed in months, not years. It was positioned as a pilot project, lots of opportunities for feedback and data collection and tweaking. And it was only made permanent after data showed that it really did have a significant safety impact and didn't have a significant negative impact on operations. But since then, we seem to have gotten stuck in the same old mentality that we have to exhaustively plan everything for years before even putting down some paint and plastic posts. Like I said, I do sympathize with where all this comes from, but the fact is, this business as usual, plans upon plans upon plans approach was never going to work. It just wasn't. And so if our goal was Vision Zero in 2025, we needed to do something much more aggressive. So a while back, folks were commiserating about this, as happens all too often. And someone asked, hey, what would it look like if the city were taking Vision Zero seriously? And so we sort of thought about this for a bit, and what came out of this is not a complete plan, but maybe what a first step would look like. And that was our advocacy petition earlier this year called Safety for Stadium Now, which called on the city to reconfigure Stadium and Maple, basically from Trader Joe's to Aldi, to no longer be a 5-lane road, to be a 3-lane road, or something like that. And to be safe for all roadway users. And to do this as a pilot project with quick build materials that could be undone if it really didn't work out. What we were saying is, hey, we've got this multi-lane road reconfiguration study, but why not actually try one of these in the real world and see how it goes? We did have a number of reasons for specifically looking at Stadium, but it's not exactly about Stadium. And in fact, I think you could make an argument if you look at some of the recent crashes that maybe Packard is a more critical corridor to work on right now. What we wanted was just to see something done. The kind of bold action that's necessary for us to achieve Vision Zero anytime, in my lifetime, frankly. Fortunately, I can tell you this advocacy effort did bear some fruit. We did convince City Council to allocate $500,000 for quick build projects. We still don't, as far as I know, have any idea of how the city is going to spend these funds, so we need to keep the pressure on to make sure that they do so effectively and expediently. And so the Safety for Stadium effort also kind of provides a good example for my next big point, which is that we need to actually come forward with a positive vision rather than just complaining about everything that's wrong with our current system. And so we kind of did that when, we said, hey, here's what we think Vision Zero would look like. But I have another example I want to talk about. So about 2 years ago, MDOT announced they were working on a study to consider the future of US 23 along the east side of Ann Arbor, basically from M14 to I-94. And as part of this study, they were going to look at 3 alternatives. You could have a general purpose lane added, a high occupancy vehicle lane added, or a flex lane added, or the sort of legally required no build option that they never picked. So, it was like, you're getting a new lane in Ann Arbor. What kind of lane would you like? What if we don't want a new lane? So at an event not entirely unlike this one, a few of us came together and formed a campaign to oppose this. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story about this tonight. It would take too long, but really what I want to focus on for the moment is just the name that we came up with, Trains Not Lanes. And it's Rob Goodspeed who gets credit for this. He said something like, it's really easy to be against something, but if you want to win people over, you've got to be for something. And hey, Trains Not Lanes also rhymes, so. And I can give you the negative case of why we don't want to expand freeways. I could talk your ears off for hours about this probably. I could tell you that every credible report says Michigan is currently underfunding its existing roads maintenance to the tune of billions of dollars. I could tell you that MDOT's own data shows that our road pavement conditions and bridge conditions are going to get much worse over the next several years if we don't do something differently from what we're doing now. And I could tell you that in spite of these facts, we have been spending staggering amounts of money widening freeways all across the state, and especially in the Southeast, especially in our region. I could tell you these things. I could tell other people these things. And people might understand that this is a problem. But people commuting into Ann Arbor from outside of town also understand that the current transportation system is not working well for them. And of course, this is a Neighbors for More Neighbors event. I think most of us understand that this is as much a housing problem as it is a transportation problem. But there's still a transportation angle to consider here. And a lot of people are going to say, hey, well, we need to do something, right? So what's that something? Well, fortunately, this time we advocates, we didn't even have to think of that something because the ride had already done it. And they made sure everybody knew it. They put out this press release. And so specifically in their 2045 long-range plan, they contemplated a regional network of commuter buses coming into Ann Arbor. And so all we had to do was say like, okay, well, listen, when we said trains, buses are cool too. There was one catch though, which was that when I was talking to some local officials about this, they would come back and say, well, hey, if you want buses, then shouldn't we do that HOV lane after all so that the buses could use it? And no, we should not do that, because if you look at all of the data, all of the things that are bad about widening freeways, the induced travel, the increased greenhouse gas emissions, the increased particulate emissions, the increased noise, the cost, not just upfront cost, but ongoing maintenance cost, all of those things are basically indistinguishable whether you are adding an HOV lane or a general purpose lane for anybody to use. But again, the ride had already provided the answer to this. They said, we want to look at bus on shoulder operations. I didn't know this until I read their long-range plan, but 12 major metropolitan areas around the country already do this to great effect. So all I had to do was write a little blog post, sort of going through this argument in slightly more detail than I'm giving you right now, and then try to make sure that those officials I talked to saw this blog post and got a chance to read it. And hey, what happened? Well, a little while later, MDOT came back and said, hey, you know what? We're not going to widen US 23 anymore. And instead, they committed to basically rebuilding most of it in the existing configuration, building new overpasses and underpasses with better walking and biking connections, which is something that's really needed. And they said, we will consider future transit plans. And if you look at this rendering, this is their rendering. It is not my rendering. You'll see there's a bus on the shoulder. And so there's a lot of stuff that would have to happen for this to become real in the real world. But the agency is actually thinking about it. And that's pretty cool. My final point here tonight is that incremental progress is often better than no progress, as much as it pains me. To illustrate this, I'm going to zoom out and continue talking about public transit, but across our region. So up until a few years ago, this is what the situation looked like when it came to funding public transit. You had this patchwork of cities and townships committing substantial local funds to public transit service. And I need to do a little disclaimer here. Some of these townships and cities that I've marked as red do have some funding for transit, but not at a level that I think is sort of the meaningful baseline. And this is a map of funding, but it's really also a map of service, because the agencies like SMART, the main suburban bus system for Metro Detroit, they, as a rule, do not serve communities that do not fund them. If they did, it would be a death spiral. So about 10 years ago, this issue got a lot of attention in Southeast Michigan because the Detroit Free Press just happened upon this guy who had this commute where he'd ride a bus for a while, and then he had to walk over 10 miles each way to get to his job in Rochester Hills. Rochester Hills is one of those opt-out communities in Oakland County, or was. And this was an interesting time to be having this conversation because there were some plans in the works. Earlier in the decade, the state legislature had finally established a regional transit authority for the four-county region. The regional transit authority was bringing forward a bold and ambitious plan to reshape public transportation in Southeast Michigan. It would include bus rapid transit and commuter rail and express buses across the counties in several different directions. And it would go on the 2016 general election ballot, a property tax levy across the four counties where every community would be funding and receiving the benefits of public transit. And it lost. And I gotta tell you, as someone who grew up in Southeast Michigan and who cares about urbanism and sustainable transportation, this is one of the most demoralizing days I've ever experienced. Because this is a fight that is much older than me. It's been going on for 50, 60, 70 years. People have been trying to figure out how we can create a functioning public transit system for our region. And this was our moment, and it failed. And because of some structural issues with the RTA that can probably only be fixed by changing state law, we have not had a chance to try this again. But this isn't the end of the story that I'm telling you tonight. Because some folks in Oakland County, in Rochester, or Rochester Hills, in fact, started to go to their local officials and say, hey, actually, we want transit service in our community. We want to be able to take the bus. And they didn't get a great reception from their local city council, but they did eventually get a pretty good reception from the County Board of Commissioners and a new county executive. And in 2022, Oakland County put a transit tax on the countywide ballot that individual communities could not opt out of. And it passed, like 60-40. And Wayne County is now locked in to doing the same thing next year. It will go on the ballot. And if it passes, we can't take this for granted, but if it passes, then for the first time, I think arguably forever, the whole Tri-County Metro Detroit region will be funding and receiving public transit across the entire region. And this still won't get us to where the RTA plan would have gotten us. We still won't get rapid transit. We won't get regional rail, but we will get at least a logical and integrated bus system for the first time ever. It would be progress. Not everything we want, but progress. And, by the way, you might notice if you've been staring at these maps that Macomb County's been all green this entire time. And that's weird, right? We all know that Macomb County is the anti-tax conservative county, right? Well, it's a quirk of history, but they've been doing a countywide millage this whole time. And hey, you might also be looking at Washtenaw County and what we're doing. Washtenaw County is quite a land of contrasts, actually, because in the city of Ann Arbor, we are funding the ride with over 4 mils of property tax compared to 0.9 mils in all the Metro Detroit suburbs. But outside of Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and Ypsilanti Township, The rest of Washtenaw County is contributing very, very little. And I don't know if that's the way it should be. But hey, that's a conversation for another day. So again, I just want to leave you with a very incomplete list of things that I've learned in trying to fight for a better transportation future. And those are that we need our leaders to stop planning and start doing, and taking bold action to solve our problems. We need to share a positive vision for what things could be instead of just complaining about the way they are. And we need to recognize that sometimes incremental progress is much better than no progress. And that's all I have for you. Thank you very much for being here.